Hello, welcome again. Marketing 3220. Powerful communication techniques for winning business of Nova Southeastern University. Dr. Daniels is with you. Okay. Today is a little bit of a story that I'm going to tell you. Okay, and it has to do with questions which you learned and which we've seen this slide before. Why, what, feeling, etc. And of course, pain, is very important. So I just wanted to bring this up so you can, just to refresh you, you can look at the slide, that we want to move from what to why to affect to feeling. We want to move from intellectual to personal to emotional, right? Okay. Now, we also know that there are two motivators, pleasure and pain. Now in this little example, I'm going to be looking at pain, but I'm also going to add pleasure in that, because a lot of times you can add pleasure into your selling. It doesn't all have to be pain. Pleasure does work in there too. So pain and pleasure are the motivators. Okay, and you'll see in this little story, at the end of it, I'm going to use a method for anticipating pleasure in the future. So it's not only going to be about pain, which most of it is, it's also going to be about pleasure in the future. I'm also incorporating a lot of dummy questions in here so that you'll be able to see how those would fit in. So this is just a little example. Now, one of the things that that we have learned in Sandler, and I don't know if it's been expressed in exactly these words, but we've learned, is that if you can learn the Sandler method, you can actually sell without ever having to present. Now, I know you find that hard to believe, but I've done it not more than once. I've been able to sell without ever presenting, because I've used the pain methodology. And remember, when you're going through that pain funnel, you don't even have to say what the solution is, because the fact that you're exploring their problem with them psychologically makes them think that you have a solution. Emotionally, they feel that you have the answer to the question, because you've been able to go ask the right questions and go through the process with them. So this is a little bit of a story about how this worked for me in selling sales training. I was at Florida International University at the time, and the dean had a call from KLM Airlines. That's Royal Dutch Airlines, the airline of Holland. I think it's merged now, with Alitalia or someone, but KLM is a well-known airline. And they wanted to have a couple of days of sales training and a couple of days of business strategy training, okay, to work with them. So the strategy professor was a very dear friend of mine, and so she and I set up an appointment to go and visit with these people. And I told her at the beginning, I said, look, don't say anything until I finish, and don't jump in and interject anything or try to save me if I look like I'm struggling, because I may do that on purpose. So she'd never been on a sales call with me before, so I had to kind of explain to her that the techniques I use are a little different from what she's probably seen before. So I'm going to make this shorter than the actual sales call, of course, because we don't have so much time. But I'll consolidate it down a little bit so you can have an idea of what went on during this sales meeting. All right, so we went into this meeting, and there was a nice table there in a little conference room, and Laura, the other professor for strategy, and I were sitting on one side of the table, and on the other side of the table were two of the senior executives of KLM for Latin America. This was the Latin American office located here in Miami, or located in Miami, that's where we were. And the top senior executive had been called back to Holland for some meetings, so he wasn't there. But these two people were very high. One was a financial vice president or something like that, or a director, and the other was more of the operational side. And they were very well dressed and well groomed. I don't know if you've ever had dealings with the Dutch, but the Dutch have been involved in international business for centuries, millennia even. So they know what they're doing when it comes to business, and they are typically a skeptical people. All right, they don't take. You have to convince them. They look at everything a little bit carefully. The Dutch are also typically their complexion is very pale. They're a northern country from north of Germany, so they're typically very pale skinned, very light skinned. All right, so at any rate, we sat down for the meeting. Now, what they didn't know was that I had just finished doing training just a month or two before for United Airlines. I had worked with them on basically the same type of thing. It was training for selling and sales strategy and that type of thing. So I knew the airline industry, and I knew what they were looking at and what they were looking for. All right. So we sat down, and after we did a little, introduction, and in this case, I didn't have to talk about budget at all because the dean had already agreed to what the budget would be if we could come to an agreement, and it was a simple thing. It really didn't cost them anything, but we got a great benefit from it. So that's very nice when you can do that, because they were going to give us four first class tickets round trip to Europe. And we felt we could use those for recruiting students or whatever. And first class to Europe is always nice. You get those very luxurious bed-like seats that you fly on, and you get fine food and wine and service. So that was a good deal. And I knew that I would get, and I think it was 4 for each of the courses, for my sales and 4 also for the strategy one. So that was already agreed to. We didn't have to worry about that. Now. We sat down and I said, well, as I would in the beginning of a meeting, I said, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? Why are you talking to us, right? What's the purpose of all this? Reverse right at the beginning. All right, and the 2 gentlemen, said, well, we really, really, really want to improve our numbers as far as people flying with us between Latin America and Miami and Europe, back and forth. It's very, very important that we have increases there. I said, that's good. I said, but I'm surprised. Now, I was using dummy, right, because I knew already. I said, I'm surprised. I flew to Europe just a couple of months ago. I was flying coach, and my goodness, it was full. Well, I knew that they don't make, because you worked with United, they don't make money on coach. They make their money on first class and business class. But I didn't want to say that. I wanted to use the questioning techniques. Remember, dummy system. You don't say what you know. You use questioning techniques. You use them. So I said, yeah, the coach was full. They said, yeah, but you don't understand. We really don't make money on coach. I said, oh, really? Tell me. And they said, well, we make money on the people in first and business class. I said, so that's what you have to do, first and business class. Now, give me an idea. What's your capacity now? I mean, what percentage of capacity are you running at in business and first? They said, oh, it's not very good. We're only at about 30 to 50% of our capacity. I said, oh, so what you want to do is learn techniques to be able to build up the capacity in those 2 classes. Yes. I said, oh, okay. That's interesting. Now, just as an example, if you could give me an example, if you could increase your capacity, increase your number of people in first and business by, let's just say, 20%. They said, 20%? Yeah, that's good. I said, well, 20%, what would that be in dollars? Now, remember, percents, you can't put percents in your pocket. Percents are not emotional. Dollars, they're emotional. They're real. And the second rule is, you never make a computation for a client. You let them make the computation. So I said, well, how much would that be? And they said, well, I don't know. And they took out a little calculator and they ran it. I don't remember what the number was over a year, but let's just say it was $7 or $8 million. That would make a difference of $7 or $8 million. And then, of course, I used a little dummy question again. I said, oh, $7 or $8 million. I mean, for KLM, is that a lot of money? Oh, yes, they said. Oh, that would be huge if we could do that. Wow, that would be fantastic because it's terrible. We're dying here. We don't have enough people flying. Pain, right? Pain. I said, oh, and obviously I developed the pain a little bit more, at the time. And then I said, well, tell me, gentlemen, let's just say we could increase it by 20%. Would that have an effect on you directly? Would there be some benefit to that? Oh, goodness, yes, we can get promotions. And, the one fellow said, yeah, I have a young family and maybe I could get, transferred back to Holland in a higher position. And so you see how I talked about pleasure? So after I took them through pain about the fact that they're losing so much money and they could make this up, now I threw out a little bit of pleasure. I threw out a little bit of looking forward to pleasure. If they could make this money, wow, that would be great because they would be able to get promoted or take their family back to Holland where they had family or whatever it might be. So that was good. So we went through this. Now it took obviously longer than this, and I developed the pain a bit more than I did in here. But you can get the idea of how it went. It was a typical Sandler presentation. And then I sat and I did the Sandler close, which is very simple. I said, well, gentlemen, what would you like to do? And they pulled out their calendar and they said, well, we have a plan for all of our people from Latin America to be here for some meetings on whatever date it was, about a month or 6 weeks later. They said, you know, could we do it in conjunction with that, like at the beginning or at the end of that meeting? So I looked at my associate and I said, for me that works, those dates are good. And she said, oh yeah, that would work for me too. I said, okay, so shall we just go ahead and book it? They said, yes, let's do that. Okay, so the sale was done. I never told them what I was going to teach them. I told them nothing, not one item of what I was going to teach them. Now, the day came when all the people were there. They were at one of these horseshoe-shaped tables, you know, and I remember the one guy who had been in the meeting was on this side of the table, and the other was on that side of the table. So I got to this part of my training session, and I said, yes, if you use these techniques, you can actually sometimes close a sale without ever presenting. And all the Dutch people in the room who were skeptical, remember, they said, no, you can't. Even these two guys, they said, oh, no, impossible. You can't do that. You can't. You have to do a presentation. You have to have slides, and you have to have this, and you have to have that. I said, well, not necessarily. And I walked in the middle of the horseshoe. I walked and I was right in front of one of the guys who'd been in the meeting. And he was sitting right next to the big boss who'd come back, of course, from Holland by then, and was sitting there. And I looked at him and I said, tell me, what did I tell you that I would teach you in this program? Now, I mentioned that the Dutch are very pale people. Well, he turned, in the words of the song, a lighter shade of pale, right there. And he looked at me, and his eyes went glassy, and he said, you never told us anything. And the boss, who was right next to him, looked at him and said, and you signed on and they never told you anything? He was a little bit embarrassed, but he was right. And the other guy, I looked at him, and he said, no, you never told us anything. I said, now do you believe that you can actually make a sale without ever presenting anything if you do it right, if you use the right techniques? So that was a major, major, major aha moment, I guess you'd say, for those people in that room. All right, so that is how it can work. That's how this whole Sandler process with the pain and the pleasure, and of course the budget and the decision process. And I had made sure in the beginning that these people could actually make the decision, so that you know, we had gone through a little decision process step. And the close was this typical Sandler close. You know, they felt the pain. Now they saw the pleasure. What do you want to do? Well, let's set up the dates. Boy, that's great, huh? So I want you all to be able to do that at some point. I want at some point you to be able to go out and make a sale without ever making a presentation, using the techniques that you're seeing on the slides, on the slide there, the pain funnel. You know, using effect, and notice pleasure down at the bottom. I threw out that little pleasure for them. And when I used to interview students for the MBA program, the students would come in, and of course it was very typical that they came in and wanted me to sell the program to them. So they would sit down in my office, and you know, they'd say, well, I'm considering your program. Tell me why I should come to your program. Now, at the time, I was running an international MBA program that was a one-year program, a very intensive program, 46 credit hours in 1 year. It was huge. So, you know, instead of answering that question, I used Sandler methodology. I just looked at them and I'd say, well, you know, I'm not sure it's the right program for you, okay? Negative reverse, right? I'm not sure it's the right program for you. I mean, you have to understand, this is a very intensive program. It's only 1 year. And you're going to be studying and studying weekends and probably doing all-nighters sometimes going through this program. And I'd shut my mouth. And what happened? Now the student would say, oh no, I can do that, right? So with one little reverse, with one little technique there, Sandler technique, they wanted me to sell them the program, and instead, within 2 minutes, I had them selling me on why they should come to the program. Amazing, huh? This Sandler stuff is just great. So, and then of course at the end, I would throw in the pleasure again. You know, tell me, what do you see yourself doing? What kind of a job would you have? What kind of position would you have after you finish this program? What is it that you see yourself doing? And now they have visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads. They're saying, oh, I'll be a private banker, or I'll be, you know, whatever it is that they were aspiring to. So, you know, I had the little bit of the pain there, and then I threw in the pleasure. And almost all of the students signed up for the program. And I used to do a little class for them towards the end of the program, and how to sell yourself, you know, for interviews and such. And I taught the same methodology, just a very, very short course. And I would say, how many of you students who saw me before you came to this program can remember what I asked you, or what went on in that meeting? And they all remembered that I said, you know, this is a tough program, should you really come? I did this negative reverse, the Sandler negative reverse, and just, oh, it's a great selling tool. So a couple of little stories there, just to help you out. Now that you've learned most of these techniques, you can see how they can be put to use in a real world environment. So thank you very much. Good selling. I wish you all the best.